Greetings and salutations. I've been seeing an awful lot of news lately on artificial intelligence. And while this will rock the art world, this is in regard to painting, drawing, digital art. It will rock the world of the arts quite a bit. One of the things to take into account is that this same horror, this same outrage, this same fear has happened before. So way back in the day, pre-Renaissance, there was no such thing as oil painting. You had mosaics, little bits of glass and ceramic and colored stone set in patterns, and then you had frescoes, which was give or take essentially watercolor on plaster, which during the Roman times was a relatively crude process, because painting itself was kind of a new thing, a new idea. Because previously, again, you had the mosaics, but you had sculpture. That was the reigning method of artistic expression, that and architecture. But generally speaking, you had mosaics and sculpture. And then comes the Renaissance and the pre-Renaissance. And throughout the Renaissance, you had these two schools of thought. One that suggested that sculpture was the superior art form, because it's the oldest and has been around since the dawn of time. And then this newfangled oil painting. And you skip ahead to the period of the neoclassical painting. And I forget the date specifically, but think of it toward the end of the 19th century, the 1800s. Most of the bread and butter in the painting industry was portraiture, because there wasn't the big, huge civic projects that were established during the Renaissance, where you had grand patrons who were usually members of the state or members of the clergy, members of the church, who paid exorbitant amounts of money to these artists to create these big, massive works. And quite often, that's what most of the Renaissance artwork was. Big, huge, massive civic works made for churches, made for public exposure. This little piece of lint on the end of the brush is being a pain in the ass. So, throughout much of the 1800s, you had the development of the novel, and then you would have the development of periodicals, and then you'd have illustration, and these other various art forms that kind of took center stage over what had been conventional arts. And if you look towards the early 20th century, the 1900s, the advent of the quote unquote snooty modern art, I would gather that, in short, much of the modern art, the abstract artists of the early 20th century were just looking for significance in the art world, since the art world itself had moved on to far more published things. Again, magazines, periodicals, newspapers, illustration work. But in regard to the neoclassical art scene, the big invention that was challenging the art world was photography. Now, what was different between the advent of oil painting in regard to sculpture, it wasn't so much that the entire structure, the foundational structure of the form, the concept of art would be thrown out the window. It was just that some people who were sculptors feared losing their work over the newfangled painting. With photography, there was general fear, and a genuine fear, that photography would take the livelihoods of these artists away. Again, the majority of what Rembrandt painted were portraits, because that was what he made his money on. There were other larger projects that he had commissions for, but generally speaking, most artists, in the mid to late 1800s, they made most of their money on portraiture. And then comes photography. What would photography do? Well, obviously it would challenge this industry, this cottage industry of portraiture. And that was the fear. So if you look at artificial intelligence, it's something similar. This fear of what artificial intelligence could do, it's a genuine fear. People should be concerned. But if you look at the advent of photography and computers and digital art, well, there are still people out there painting. Still people out there using dead hair on sticks, and at this point, synthetic hair on sticks, with what's basically ashes in suspended form, drawing. Artificial intelligence will be easier, but I've never been convinced that anything that's easier is always better. Never have I ever considered anything that's easier better. I've never considered convenience as a superior concept. In point of fact, I think convenience is poison. I think it's had more damaging effects on the human psyche, convenience and ease, than most things. It looks like the battery's going out on the camera, so we'll cut this short. So I can understand people's fear over artificial intelligence, but that should just allow people to be more creative, push themselves, be more dynamic. Because artificial intelligence is only as good as the programmer who programs it. And digital art and CGI has been around for quite a while. And well, in the movie industry and the film industry, and I don't think this is a very good thing, because I consider the movie props from the 90s to be more realistic. CGI allows for more detail, more motion and movement. The fear has justification, but I think it's been exaggerated a bit. So take heed not to worry too terribly much about artificial intelligence. So anyway, that's all I have for that. See ya.